Okay, well, we've reached the top of the hour, and like as we've started in the chat, be sure to say hello to your fellow study buddies here as you're getting to learn some more about the laundromat business. You have found CLA's How to Start a Laundromat webinar. This is a free webinar that we do every month. I'll tell you a little bit more about us in just a moment. But first, a little bit of housekeeping. The most common question we get is this being recorded and can I get a copy? The answer is yes and yes, right? So we are recording the presentation. We have a follow-up workflow where we get this all out to you. So you're obviously very welcome to take notes, but just know that we are recording here along the way. And also on our YouTube channel, at Laundry Association. We also have an archive of all the past monthly webinars just like this. We have some familiar guest hosts like Neal that have joined us a couple of times, but we've got some other folks that have been with us along the way. The other thing I wanted to point out here at the top is this is a lot more interesting if it's more of a Q&A and less of a lecture. So Neal and I are ready to take on your questions, and the easiest way for me to manage that is through the question and answer box. So if you look at your toolbar there, sometimes on the top, sometimes on the side, but either way, look for Q&A, and you can start typing your questions in there at any time. I'll also try to keep an eye on the chat, but like I said, it's easier for me to manage that through the Q&A side. Andrew, thank you. He put our YouTube channel in the chat. So Andrew's part of our team. He's going to be helping out with resources and saying hello and adding some links into the mix as we go along. So we're ready to rock. We've got 90 minutes. We've got some prepared material, but we also have, like I said, a lot of time allocated for your questions and answers. And we are just going to sort of naturally pick those up as we go along. We'll take a few questions and then we'll do a few slides and so on and so forth. So with that, let's go ahead and get rolling here. As I said at the top, we're CLA. We are the National Nonprofit Trade Association representing the laundromat industry. This is our 65th anniversary, so we've been doing this literally since the industry started. Our role is that of a nonprofit trade association, which means we're here to represent the best interests of the industry. We do that through education. We do that through networking and events. We do that through legislative advocacy. We have a number of business solutions and other resources that you're going to hear about along the way. But essentially, it's a membership organization. And I see that a number of you have already become a member, which is awesome. And we want to help you along the way. What you're not going to hear from us this morning is how to get a laundromat in 30 days or 15 days or 10 minutes, how to find a free laundromat, how to get passive income, how to show up once a week and pick up quarters. That is not our vibe. That's not what we think is a fair or accurate representation of the industry. We love the business, but we think that part of our role as stewards and authoritative experts in the business is to tell you like it is. And we will certainly be doing that along the way and make sure that you get a level-headed look at the business. And then really our job is not to recruit you. We love the business, but we want to give you the tools that you're going to need to make a good decision for yourself. And with that, let me introduce myself and then I'll introduce our special guest. My name is Brian Wallace. I serve as president and CEO of CLA. I've had now 33 years in the business, and so I've done more than a couple of these interactions and had the real privilege of working with many thousands of aspiring first-time laundromat owners, working with you, answering your questions, consulting, and I've got a lot of great members that have helped me learn the business over the years. But again, I'm an academic. I'm someone who studied this. But to enhance our conversation, I thought we'd get a real life operator. And I'll introduce Neal Shapiro, who he and his wife Kate own Wash Time on Fullerton here in Chicago, as well as a very robust laundry delivery service called Wash Ferry. So Neal, welcome. Good to have you with us this morning.
Well, Brian, thank you. I am real life. I'm not AI generated, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you. Thank you.
Oh, of course, Neil. And while we're at it, why don't you take this opportunity to give folks a little bit more on your background and tell us a little bit more about wash time and wash fairies. And then as we get further in the conversation, I'll circle back and I'll ask you a few more questions about that along the way, but maybe help us set the table with that a little bit.
All right. Well, thanks. My background is actually in manufacturing. I owned and operated mid-sized manufacturing companies for about 45 years. And was lucky enough to be approached by a strategic buyer who wanted to buy everything in 2019, a year before the pandemic. And so I technically retired, although my wife tells our friends that means I work 5 days a week now instead of seven.
Right.
So about 11 years ago, Kate had the great idea that we should buy a laundromat for our adult son, Michael, who has disabilities and was unable to find meaningful employment. So, after about a year of investigation and searching around for sites, and of course, one of the first things I did was find the Laundry Association and had lunch with Brian Wallace and said, Brian, what is this laundromat thing? And so I was lucky enough to have a one-on-one of one of these sessions. And anyway, we did find a really nice laundromat in Chicago. It's nice now. It wasn't so nice then, but we purchased the business. It's about 6,000 square feet. When we bought it, it was open 24 hours, 7 days a week, and we have remained that way ever since. The store was not what Brian Grell would call a zombie mat, but it was in definite need of
Mm,
a lot of TLC. So
mhm.
over the 11 years, we've completely retooled the store. We've remodeled it. We've replaced virtually everything in the store. And it's been very successful for our son, Michael, who now goes there 5 days a week and does some minor maintenance on the machines. He cleans, he fills the vending machines, he manages our little store with laundry detergent and items for the customers to purchase. And probably more than anything else, he has a great time chatting it up with the customers who come in. So it's really been a great experience for Michael. And thankfully for Kate and I, it's actually been profitable. So it's all things good.
Outstanding, Neil, and that's a wonderful story and one that we love to talk about. And I'll give everyone a little bit of a teaser. We spent the day together yesterday at the store with our video crew, and we did a really nice interview with Neil and Kate, and spent time with Michael and some customers. And so in the weeks ahead, you'll be getting a little deeper dive into what they're up to over there. So a lot of good stuff happening. And what Neil didn't mention is that he's been an incredible volunteer with us. He's currently a member of our board of directors and our executive committee, and he's our chair-elect, as a matter of fact. So he'll be taking the helm here in another year or so. And he's also been very active in our Laundry Cares Foundation, where we have a mission to give back to the neighborhoods where our laundromats do business that are often under-resourced neighborhoods. And one of the things that you'll see from Neal's store is a section that is dedicated to kids with one of our Family Read Play Learn centers, which is a outreach of our effort to provide early development and literacy resources and free books in neighborhoods that need them most. And so we don't have enough time to get into all of that, but I'll make sure that we touch on that once or twice before we get to the end of the program. So with that, I'm going to do two reminders since a bunch of you have joined since the top. Number one, we are recording, and you will get a copy of this presentation and the conversation. And number two, please ask questions. The best way to do that is through the question and answer prompt. And I'll also keep an eye on the chat, but we want to make sure that we get to all of your questions before we get through the end of the program, but we need a place to start. So we are going to start with just the tail of the tape, kind of an overview of the business, and we'll, like I said, incorporate your questions as we go along. So let's start with just what's in a name. Laundry, coin laundry, laundromat, lavanderia, washateria, launderette, coin op. We're all talking about a retail space where we invite customers to come in and do self-service laundry. And we'll talk about some of the other services like Neal's delivery service as we go, but we're really talking about that store, that laundromat store. What we're not talking about is the vended laundry equipment that you would find in an apartment, condo, dormitory, some other type of multifamily setting. That's a great business, but it's not our focus as an association or our segment of the industry. So I like to kind of get some of those definitions out of the way. Because this is a theme that you'll hear from me a couple times, this is a highly fragmented industry, owner-operator business. And so when we talk about the number of locations, it's an estimate. When we talk about sales volume, it's an estimate. The number of stores here at 29,000 is probably pretty close. The sales volume is probably a little light. You can make a good argument based on some data that it's closer to $8 or $9 billion, but just the same, just giving you some kind of context on the size of the business. One of the things that I'll refer to several times is that we have an annual benchmarking survey that is available to our members and is a great resource. And from that, I can tell you that the statistical mean or average size store is 2,850 square feet. So you heard Neal talking about his 6,000 square foot store. And so, yes, that's twice the statistical average. And these stores do range in size from 1,000 feet, maybe on the small end. We see members at 10,000, even some outliers at 12 or 13,000 square feet. And I think the real thing, Neal, to talk to people that always have a question about, well, how big should my store be? I think it's often a function of the size of market or the density of the market that you're serving, and as a practical matter, what's available in terms of a retail space. And so your store happens to be 6,000 square feet, and it feels to me kind of right sized for the neighborhood that you're serving.
Yes, I think it is right size. When Kate and I first started looking at stores, we worked with a broker here in the Chicago area, and he initially started showing us smaller stores, a couple of 1,500 square foot stores, couple 3,000 square foot stores. And at one point, we said, well, what's you sell these all the time. What's your recommendation? He said, I think you should buy the biggest store you can afford. Now, of course, that's a broker, right? I should buy the
Right.
biggest house I can afford, right? But the truth of the matter is, it's not exactly identical, but the amount of time and effort that you are going to expend on a 3,000 square foot store is not any less, any more or less than the time you're going to spend on a 6,000 square foot store. So bigger is better in that sense. However, to your point about market, we have a 6,000 square foot store in an area of Chicago that is incredibly high density. There are probably 100,000 people that live within a half mile of my store. So there are some rural communities that don't have 100,000 people within 5 miles. In that case, a 6,000 square foot store would probably be overkill. So I think you have to match it um, to your finances and your willingness to spend money on the endeavor going in, but also to the density of the area you're serving.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it doesn't hurt that you've got 50 parking spaces, as I was reminded of yesterday, right? So it's a matter of it's more art than science when it comes to laundromat location and sizing. But these are some of the principles that you would be using to guide the conversation. The denser the population tends to be the larger the store. And then the larger the store, the larger the parking requirement will be. So, you know, I see a question here in the Q&A box about average population density. It really is a function of the size of the market, particularly for our demographics, which we'll talk about here in a moment, but also what's available, right? Because sometimes, you just happen to have, or your predecessor happened to have a 6,000 square foot space that they built out, as opposed to a 3,000 or a 1,500 or a 4,500. So we'll talk some more about that along the way, because it is a big part of this. And with respect to the spaces themselves, most of our members, particularly in the inner city areas, are leasing their space, right? They are on a commercial lease with a landlord, and that is the more typical situation. Now, we certainly have lots of members who own their real estate, or certainly aspire to own their real estate. I think everyone would agree that would be the ideal situation if money were no object and if the buildings were available for purchase. But you typically have a financial hurdle there, a simple, availability issue. Most of these sort of strip centers aren't for sale. And because we are typically as part of a strip center, now Neal's in a 2-tenant space with a Family Dollar, but often you're in a position where to control the real estate, you would have to buy the whole plaza or the whole shopping center. So that, again, is a matter of availability and cost. So those are a couple things for you to keep in mind. Back to this core customer demographic. Again, one of the great trends that's going on in the industry right now is that we're doing laundry for everybody. We're seeing a lot of homeowners. We saw a lot of single family homes near Neal's store, where we know that they probably have maybe a small top loader or home style machine, but are opting to come to the laundromat to get it all done at once with multiple loads. And often that's a function of a multi-generational household. Lots of folks means lots of laundry. But if we had to really boil down just to our core customer, it would be that low to mid-income renter. Again, we like to consider everybody a potential customer, but that's where our core business really lies. And so if we have to, say, look at a demographic report for a site, you're probably going to start with renter versus owned households. You're probably going to be looking at household incomes. You're probably going to be looking at persons per household, really just trying to paint the picture of who most needs our service. And so we see laundromats successful in all kinds of communities, and again, increasingly in what might be considered non-traditional locations, because again, as the stores get better equipped, better marketed, cleaner, safer, all those things, we're finding more and more clientele willing to come see us, even if they have access to a machine in their apartment building or even a home machine available to them. So, but in terms of core customer demographic, that's where we're at. And, Neal, we talked a little bit about this yesterday, but you've got sort of a melting pot type neighborhood with Hispanic clientele, African-American clientele, and lots of other folks. So what do you tell people when it comes to this question of demographics and what should I be looking for?
Well, there are lots of industry studies and there are lots of demographic studies. I think pretty much, I mean, high density is certainly number one, right? I mean, the more people there are closer to your store, the more chance that people are going to come to your store. That's number one. I think, and I don't know, I'm not saying better, worse, indifferent. I just think, again, the demographics bear out the idea that many Hispanic families are 3 generations in the household. The grandparents take care of the children while mom and dad both work. They don't have a lot of time to do the laundry, right? So they want to come to the laundromat where they can use 4 washing machines and 6 dryers and get the whole business done in an hour or 90 minutes. So you want high density, you want rental. Hispanic community is fantastic. The African American community is fantastic. You want families with young children, and You believe me, you want a parking lot. That is, I mean, the parking lot is almost more important than the store, because if you
Yep.
don't have a parking lot, people just aren't going to come to your store. So, to me, those are the critical things.
Yeah, no, it's well said. And yeah, I was working with a member the other day, and we kind of came down to if you can't park, you can't wash, right? I mean, there are there's a handful of markets, some neighborhoods in San Francisco or New York City or Philly where people will walk with their laundry or hop on a bus with their laundry, but that is just really a sliver of the marketplace. You really need to be able to park cars and for them to bring laundry. And again, it really is a limiting factor. You can have 100 washing machines, but if you only have 15 parking spaces, you're going to be limited as to how much business you could do. And so related to this, I see a question from Bob about the ideal distance for someone to come to a laundromat. As I just alluded to, Bob, we don't, there is a factor for walk-ins. Neal's in a kind of neighborhood where you will see, I imagine, some walk-ins. But I think that you don't want to rely on that. I had a member not long ago that had a Dynamite location, but there was no off-street parking. And so if you look at just the raw demographics, they're off the charts. But if there's nowhere to park, that's a real pause. Now, what do some of these sort of walk-in laundromats look like? They tend to be small. 1,000 square feet, 1,200 square feet, 800 square feet, if it is in a true walking neighborhood. So you can see the stores tend to be scaled for the size of those marketplaces that they're working through. So that's an important consideration. Let me squeeze in a question from Greg. I see that you've done a lot of research and help with next steps evaluating purchases, due diligence, valuation, and negotiation. So um, again, the association, we have a number of best practice guides, videos. I do one-on-one consultations with our members around that. I'll share toward the end of the presentation, and maybe Andrew can put it in the chat. We do have a Laundromat FAQs series of videos. I think there's 7 or 8 of them that do talk about due diligence, valuation, and negotiation. But that's the sort of thing we help our members with all the time, Greg. You're welcome, Bob. All right, well, let's move on to some more content. And what thought I would do with this next section is I kind of joked at the top about there's a lot of hype about our industry right now. It's kind of a social media darling. Everyone's talking about laundromats. And that's a lot of fun, especially for those of us that have been at it for a long time. But there's also a little bit of uh, uh, distortion or misinformation, or maybe not all the information out there is right on the money. So I thought what made sense here is let's talk about all the great things about laundromats, why our members love the business, why you should probably take a closer look at potentially coming on board in our industry with an investment. And then I'm going to balance that. I'm going to do a slide on what are some of the negatives, some of the pitfalls, obstacles, some things that might give you pause. And so I want to give you that, again, kind of level-headed look at the business, but I'm going to use my prerogative to start on the good foot. So what a lot of people love about our business is this notion of being an essential service. And as Neal mentioned a moment ago, the more people, the more dirty clothes. People have to do laundry. It's an essential basic need. It's just a matter of where are they going to do the laundry? In their home, in their apartment, in a retail laundromat, or through a delivery service. And so that essential nature of the business has really stood out to our members, particularly when we face things like recessions or a crazy outlier like the pandemic, where we were actually able to lobby and have the government officially designate us as an essential service. So we were able to stay open during that pandemic. So that type of steady, reliable, recession-resistant, pandemic-resistant nature of the business is what a lot of our members really look for. And I do think that that's perhaps a factor that has driven a lot of this interest in our industry over the last couple of years, is people that may have been in other industries or may have been in a corporate environment and don't feel kind of that stability to the level that they might like, and are looking for something that they can view as a little bit more of a safe harbor, safe haven. So I do think that that's a legitimate I don't like saying recession proof. I've been through a number of them here at the association. And so we are certainly impacted, but nowhere near what other industries face. And that was most definitely the case with the pandemic because we, like I said, were able to stay open. We're essential service providing that, really critical need of clean clothes. Another thing that our folks like about the business is the simplicity of the business. And I always have to be careful here semantically. Simple does not mean easy. Simple means sort of straightforward or evident. And so the complexity now, when Neal was running a large manufacturing business with perhaps hundreds of employees and lots of literally moving parts, coming to the laundromat is a simple point. So I'm going to lay out a couple of these, what I see as these evident keys to success, and I'll let Neal comment on these. Certainly there are more, but if we had to boil it down, location, cleanliness, the machines have to be up and running, and you have to have that customer service. Now, what you see when you drive around is in the store that Neal and Kate bought, they weren't executing on these simple principles, right? The equipment was out of order, the place was disgusting and dirty. Maybe the location wasn't as good as it could be for some of the ones that you may be looking at. So that's when people say it's a simple business. This is what it means to me, that the keys to success are pretty much out front, easy to identify, but like a lot of things, it all comes down to execution. So Neal, would you quibble with my list, or does that seem like it makes sense to you?
I would not quibble with your list. I'd like to comment on it for a moment, but
Hmm.
I want to go back also to your second point that we're recession and pandemic resistant and providing an essential service. You know, the United States, certainly in my lifetime, has become a consumer economy as opposed to a manufacturing economy. And in the consumer economy, there's services and laundromat is certainly a service, but doing your laundry is not a discretionary expenditure.
Right.
So when the economy goes south for whatever reason, it might be a depression, it might be a recession, it might be a pandemic, who knows what. When the economy stumbles, discretionary spending disappears quickly. Laundry is not a discretionary expenditure. So that makes a big difference in a consumer economy. So that's one thing.
Hmm.
As far as the keys to success, I agree completely. Um, but I want to expand on the last one. We say customer service. Realistically, all retail is customer service. There's no question about that. But the laundromat is particularly the customer experience because when someone comes to do their clothes, listen, I don't care what their income level is. I don't care what their educational background is. These are their clothes. This is how they present themselves to the outside world. And they care about their clothes. They don't want to put their clothes in a moldy, dumpy, dirty washing machine. They don't want to fold their clothes on a folding table that looks like somebody just ate their lunch on it. They just want the simple things, the same simple treatment that you would have in your own home, in your own laundry room. And that's what we try to provide to our customers. Clean machines, attendants that are willing to help you do anything you need, attendants that are friendly and know your name and know that your kids are about to graduate from grammar school. And listen, they want a safe environment. They want it well lit. They want it clean. They want the machines to work. And they want the store to be open when they want to do their laundry. So those to
Hmm.
me are the key elements.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think those are important, and hours of operation is something underrated. And I don't know if I mentioned it at the top, but yours is a 24-hour location, and you're kind of in a 24-hour neighborhood, so
Mhm.
that that carries through. So in the meantime, I see some additional questions I'm going to get to after this slide. Keep them coming. I appreciate that. And so here's the other thing that I think is worth pointing out here. I tend to reject this notion of this being a passive or absentee business, and I suppose people can define those things however they however they want. But while I do reject that characterization, I absolutely believe and see it with our members every day, which is the business does offer a lot of flexibility, kind of a flex time business, a part-time business, if you will, meaning that just like anything else, you have to pay attention. You have to make sure that the place is clean, the equipment's up and running. You got to do your back office things. You have to do the marketing. But to a large extent, you get to more or less dictate when you want to spend that time. Now, there's exceptions that an employee doesn't show up or a hose breaks or there's some kind of issue that requires you to be there immediately. But sort of that flexibility is something that I do hear a lot of from our members and see that it is appreciated. But what I don't hear is, well, I show up once a week and collect quarters. I don't hear that, at least not from folks that are successful. And those that end up in that mindset, those stores get run down and they're for sale for pennies on the dollar because the store owner did not take proper care of that. But what I hear is, I love being able to drive my kids to school, or I like to coach Little League, or I have another business that I spend time on. And so that flexibility is something that I do believe is a fair characterization and see that a lot is a strong point called out by our members. Lastly, here on the kind of the pro end of the pros and cons list is this notion that you can do it more or less on your own. In other words, we'd love for you to use your association. We'd love for you to use a qualified commercial laundry equipment distributor or a qualified broker. I don't mean that you don't have people on your team, but with what essentially is no national chains and a couple of franchises now that are entering the marketplace, um, I've had plenty of examples just this year where people that are on this webinar and decided to buy or build their first store can go out and do it uh, at a premium level. You can do a great store with great branding, great equipment, well executed. You don't necessarily have to be part of something larger, and those same members tend to add a second, a third, a fourth store over time. And so with this fragmented nature of the business, 29,000 stores, I think the largest organization off the top of my head, I think we have two that are just under 100 locations. And then if we drop that level down to 50 stores, we're still counting on one hand. So very, very fragmented type of business. So I just want to kind of use that as an encouragement that you can kind of build this in your image and decide how you want to go out and make this happen. And so that's another thing that's very attractive to our members is kind of building their own brands. Okay, now let's pause and get caught up on a couple of questions. Jocelyn was over in the chat and she asked about, would it be a good idea to work in a laundromat to learn the basics before purchasing? Well, I would not discourage you from doing that. I have certainly had some members that have gone that way, but I'll use your question, Jocelyn, as an opportunity to share one of my favorite pieces of advice, which is if you have any thoughts after today's call that you want to pursue this, one of my best recommendations is put two loads of towels in the trunk of your car and go do laundry. Whenever you pass a laundromat, pull over, do a load of laundry. Go to do, uh, see 5 stores, 10 stores, 20 stores in your area. And it's going to do a couple of things for you, Jocelyn. One, if this is the area that you plan to develop, you start to build a little bit of a competitive analysis. You can sort of inventory these stores, see how they're doing on parking, machines, vend prices, et cetera. But it also gives you a feel for what you like and what you don't like. And fundamentally, is this an environment where you want to be working, right? Is this a good fit for you? And I'm going to touch on that here on the next slide. But spending time in the laundromat, and Neal, I know that you and Kate went out to a gazillion laundromats before you made your purchase. And I wonder if you have any recollections of what you may have learned in that process.
Well, yes, we did. We spent a year investigating and deciding about the purchase of our store. And We probably, I'm not exaggerating, we probably visited 25 laundromats, and we actually went to other states to visit laundromats, not with no intention of buying a laundromat there, but
Right.
just to see because
Hmm.
somebody said, "Oh, you ought to see this one, or you ought to see that one." So we actually went and did that. I would suggest, and certainly speaking for myself, and I think I can speak for most of this, certainly all the CLA board members, the CLA is a wonderful organization for networking. And I will put the offer out there. If any one of you is in Chicago and you want to spend an afternoon at a laundromat, please call me, contact me, come to our store. You can put your hands on it. You can ask me any questions you want. You can sit there for an hour and watch how people do it. You can see what it's like when it's busy and crazy and crowded. You can see what it's like when there's 15 kids in our playroom. But uh, the idea, frankly, working at a laundromat, I think would be problematic because I'm not sure a laundromat owner would hire a prospective person. But anyway, going there and spending an afternoon or a day would certainly be a worthwhile experience, and it will give you a sense of what the community is. Um, not to sound elitist, but is this where you want to spend your days? It's an important question. I have actually met laundromat owners that say, I only go there at night because I don't want to be with the customers. Well, I think that's kind of a crazy way to run a business, but some people are like that. So I think through Brian Wallace, you could contact a board member in your area or another store owner in your area, and I'm sure they would extend the same invitation that I'm extending. And I think it would be well worth your time.
No, thank you for that, Neil. And again, we love connecting our members, and we do it all the time. And the more you can learn up front, the better you can understand it up front. Obviously, the better success you're going to have. Um, and so I've got a couple kind of forward-looking questions or kind of state of the industry type questions, starting with how do you see the laundromat industry evolving over the next 5 to 10 years? Is steady growth still expected, or are there potential headwinds, such as cheaper, more efficient residential machines that could slow demand for self-service laundry? So obviously we're limited on time here, Neil, but you want to take the first shot, at least kind of your couple of thoughts about where we're going from here, particularly as it relates to maybe specifically call out on this question of affordability of residential machines.
Well, I'll circle back to my manufacturing career. Two of our largest customers were Whirlpool and General Electric. And I can tell you that the price of washers and dryers is not going down, it's going up. And frankly, I think the quality is going down while the price goes up. So I would not be concerned that the residential machines are going to put laundromats out of business. And I can promise you, nobody has an 80-pound washer in their house, and I've got half a dozen of them. So I don't see that as a consideration. In fact, I do see the industry growing. I'm going to say on three different fronts. First of all, laundromats used to be considered kind of seedy, and you didn't want to be in a laundromat. That's not where you want to go. It's not like that anymore. I've been in stores that are beautiful. I mean, they've been designed by interior design companies. My store, frankly, is beautiful, but I mean, it's not a seedy, dumpy place that you don't want to be. Laundromats can be kind of fun, frankly. So I think there are more people going to laundromats because of the convenience of it, not necessarily the, oh my God, I don't have a washer. What am I going to do? There are people with washers that go to laundromats, and I think that market is growing as laundromats become nicer. That's one thing. Second thing is, there are a lot of people that come to our store and leave their laundry for us to do. We call that drop off. Other people call it wash, dry, fold, fluff and fold. There's a million names for it. But the point is, they're bringing the laundry to our store and we're doing the laundry, and they come back the next day and pick it up. Very convenient for them. So that's an aspect, and that part of the business is growing. The
Absolutely.
other part
Mhm.
that's growing is the pickup and delivery. And I mean, to me, the simplest way I can explain the growth of that part of the industry is that there are far more people that do not come to a laundromat than there are people that do. And every one of those people that does not come to a laundromat is at least a potential customer of a pickup and delivery service. So I see the industry growing in all three aspects.
Yeah, it's hard to argue, and thank you for laying that out. Neal, I think that again, no one's got a crystal ball. But we certainly are bullish on the future from a consumer demand standpoint, right? I think that particularly with the wash, dry, fold, and delivery, gives us a lot of reasons to be excited about that. And then Jeff's comment that follows quickly here, thank you, Jeff, is how saturated are the major metropolitan areas today? Is there room for growth? Or is it more opportunistic by buying out an existing operator? So this is kind of the buy versus build question, which I've got a chart for a little bit later in the presentation, Jeff. But what I will say is that saturated is often kind of like in the eye of the beholder. Yes, a lot of existing operators, oh, it's saturated. It's there's no room. But then if you really look at the quality of the stores, that you might get a different answer. I do a ton of traveling on behalf of the association. I'm in a different city a couple times a month and have been doing this for years. And one of my favorite questions to ask audiences of existing operators is I ask the following: what percentage of stores that you compete with would you grade at a B plus or better? What percentage of stores do you compete with would you grade at a B plus or better? And this kind of gets to your question, Jeff, about saturation. And again, quantitative is one thing, qualitative is another. I would say that the majority of answers I get, and I've done this a lot, is questions that answers 20%, 30%. Sometimes I'll hear 10%. In other words, only 20 or 30% of the stores would they grade through their own lens of a B plus or better. And maybe once in a while I hear 50%. I don't hear 70%. I don't hear 80% or 90%. Never. In other words, there's a lot of stores out there that, as we talked on this slide, just aren't really executing at that level for a variety of reasons. And so, um, that buy versus build, Jeff, is probably more driven by kind of your budget, the availability of either great sites to build on or worthy stores to buy at the right price, more so than a saturation factor. Are there a lot more new stores out there that are doing the things that Neal talked about? Absolutely. Is it at the 60, 70, 80% of the market? No. I don't, that's not been my observation. Neal, anything you want to add to that?
Well, I'm just thinking about your question. I've not had that question posed to me
Okay.
before.
You actually have a number of pretty good stores near you, as a matter of fact.
I do. In fact, within a mile of my store, if you had a 1 mile radius, there are over 25 stores in a 1 mile radius to my store. Now, again, we're a very high density area. Um, First of all, it's interesting. There are some zombie mats close to me. I don't even consider that I compete with them.
Right,
They're just there and they're just there until they go out of business because they're not doing anything to improve their store. They're either going to go out of business because all their equipment breaks or because they go bankrupt and because they never raise their prices. So,
right.
I don't even consider them to be competitors. But there are some significant stores close to me. I will tell you this, and a lot of people shake their head and say that can't be, but there have been two, three, four, I'm going to call them mega stores that have been built within 2 miles of my store. And when I say mega, I'm talking 10,000 square feet or more. Okay. Those stores have been built within 4 years of within the last 4 years. My business continues to grow.
Right.
So I'm not entirely sure how to explain it. I go by their stores and they have customers in their parking lots. It's not like my store is better, but my store is different. It's in a different location. It's on a different street. I have customers that have been coming to my store for 10, 15, 20 years.
Right.
It's just because there's another store doesn't mean there isn't business for your store.
Yeah, and that's often been my observation in terms of this zero sum. Well, if a new store opens, whatever business they do, I'm going to lose. What I tend to see more often, particularly with high quality stores, is that they conspire to grow the overall market. In other words, bringing more people out of homes and apartment buildings that weren't using any laundromat. Every market is different, but again, that tends to be more the experience that I see. So. You guys have really kicked it up on the questions. I appreciate it. So I've got Jonathan on deck, another new member of CLA. We've got a call coming up. But I'm going to try to knock through a few more slides just to make sure we don't get too far behind. We're about halfway through our time. All right, so I promised a little bit of a offset, a balance to all these cool things we were talking about while people love the business, and we've touched on a couple of these already. But I think it's important to kind of talk about what are some of the potential downsides. Um, this notion of scarcity is really become more front and center in my interactions around the country. And again, many of you have expressed frustration, particularly when it comes to looking for a store to buy. In other words, you're in a market, there's just not a lot available, or there may not be a lot that's available that is at the right price or has the right lease or one of those other considerations related to that. So I do think the kind of this notion of scarcity of great sites to build on and stores to buy, I think is a real thing. And frankly, we just have more folks that are looking for these opportunities. So we've got a lot of our members that are looking to add a location. And so that does put some pressure on other existing stores to purchase and new stores to build on. And so, I think that is a real thing. And I think that really just requires some discipline and some patience on your part. And those of you that have done consultations with me understand that you have to wait for that right opportunity, and the things have to line up, the basics have to line up in order to make that possible. So I do think that that's legitimate. As we've now alluded to twice, engaging in the general public, particularly in some of the neighborhoods that we serve, is not for everybody. That's not a knock on anybody, but I think you should be eyes wide open in terms of what your experience would look like. I had a member not long ago who I gave this advice earlier about going out to do laundry in the area. This was a professional person that was more in a corporate environment. She called me up about 3 weeks later and said, Brian, I'm going to be the shortest lived member you've had. The association has been super helpful, but you know what? I just went out and spent time in a half a dozen laundromats, and that's not for me. I said, hey, that's great. You did your homework, you did your research, it wasn't for you. Better you figure that out now than after you've spent a considerable sum to get into the business and find that it's not for you. And so, kind of the euphemistically, what we are dealing with here is that, you do get a front row seat on some of the societal challenges, whether it be homelessness or addiction or just kind of dealing with the general public in general. Now, Neal, Kate, and Michael have an awesome relationship with their community. And I think that it can be an enriching opportunity in a way to give people a better place to go to do laundry. But again, it's not for everybody. So I like to point that out and to double down on that advice to get out and spend time doing laundry and get a feel for the environment. But by far, as I've done this over the years, the number one challenge that I run into trying to coach and work with potential first-time laundromat owners is really when it comes down to the financial requirements. And so some of you watching here, maybe you have a strong balance sheet, you've owned other businesses, you're ready to stroke a check, you're good to go, wonderful. But most that I run into, it's a matter of trying to come up with that initial investment to get into the business. And so for me to say that, I think I need to back that up with giving you some context. And so this is, somewhat, some trepidation here because there's so many variables, but I also feel like I need to give you some sense of what I mean by what you're going to need. And then I'm going to follow up with a slide about the financing options that are out there. Um, the cost of getting into an existing store, at least in terms of purchase price, is evident, right? It's a listing, you see what the price is, and you'll see stores listed for a couple $100,000 up to a couple million, depending on the size and the volume and the equipment and so forth. And with that, if you're going to seek financing from some of the familiar resources for financing, typically that's a 30 to 40% down payment required. Of course, it depends on your credit worthiness and the options that are available specific to you, but I think that's not a bad place to begin. Now, the cost to build out a store, and I'm going to use the most frequent or most common example, which would be going into an existing space, not buying the real estate, but taking this existing space, whether it be a vanilla box or something that's being used for another purpose now, and converting that into a laundromat. So we're talking about the leasehold improvements, the build out, the equipment, and the installation of the equipment, turning that space into a laundromat. And I ask this question every day, everywhere I go. What does that cost look like today on a per square foot basis? And I think that it's fair to say that you need to start at $300 or $400 a square foot, and knowing that it could be more than that. I see projects routinely that are $500 a foot, 550, and it also could be less depending on the situation. So the equipment cost is pretty easy to determine in terms of getting a quote from a commercial laundry equipment distributor. The build out is a little bit more of a moving target. You may go into a space where all the utilities are exactly what you need. In other cases, you need a lot more utility service than what is there now, and that could be a major factor. And so this is where I always say, beware the notion of infrastructure, and I'm buying that store for the infrastructure. Not all infrastructure is created equal, right? You could find a great opportunity where the water, sewer, gas, and electric are perfect for what you're going to need. But not always the case. So someone who knows what they're doing has to look at that for you and help you understand that. And those are some of the things that can move that needle quite a bit. So if we tie this back to the statistical mean, 2,850 square feet, you can start doing the math. Yes, an average size store today for a build out, excluding real estate, is in excess of $1 million, quite often 1.2 million, 1.4 million. It could be more depending on what those needs are. So the only thing that really gives you the clearest picture is to get a real quote on a real project from someone that knows what they're talking about. And I've mentioned commercial laundry equipment distributors a couple of times now on our website, laundryassociation.org. We have a directory, a searchable directory for these distributors that are authorized to sell one of the major brands of washers and dryers in your area. And I highly recommend that you use that as a resource to start reaching out to those folks. So Neal, anything you wanted to add on the cost of getting into this business?
Well, I guess I would add a couple of things, and this is based on several different business experiences. But first of all, in addition to whether you buy, lease, build, whatever you do, you also need working capital
Right.
to finance the operation. And especially if you're building from the ground up where there's never been anything before, you're not going to have any customers on day one, and you're not going to hit your stride maybe for 90 days or 6 months. So you need working capital to sustain the operation. That's one thing. As far as buying an existing laundromat, if the laundromat is for sale, it's for sale for some reason. And if the reason is because the equipment is worn out, then in addition to whatever you're going to need for a down payment, you need to understand the cost of retooling the store. And that could be $1 million in a minute.
Right.
So you really need to do your homework as to the condition of what you're buying and how you're going to finance improvements going forward. So those are the two things that I would add.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm going to touch on that even further here. We start to talk about valuation. So, um, uh, while I flip the next slide, Neil, maybe you can tackle Jonathan's question on what are the key considerations for 24 hours versus fixed hours or normal hours? What were a couple things that popped to your mind there?
Well, I mean, number one is safety. Okay, that's number one. So our organization is split into three shifts. We start at 7 in the morning. So first shift is 7 to 3, then 3 to 11. Third shift is 11 to 7. In the 11 to 7, what we call the overnight hours, okay, our store does about 15% of our walk-in business in the overnight hours. And that's because we're in a community where we've got a lot of households with both parents working, both the couple working. And we have a lot of people that work second shift and they come to the laundromat in the middle of the night and do the laundry. So uh, I would suggest it's not for everybody. You really need to figure out if it's worth being open. Okay. You need to understand the safety aspect. We always have two employees in the store from 11 to 7. That's just a safety thing.
Hmm.
Um, I think well, again, safety and security, and that's for your employees, and that's for your customers. They're not going to come there if they don't feel safe. Uh, Now, in our case, we have the added component of the pickup and delivery service. We have trucks that are on the street during the day. They start bringing the laundry back around 3, 4 in the afternoon, and we have a staff of people that come in the overnight hours and
Hmm.
process all of that laundry so it can be delivered the next day. So we sort of have a dual utilization of the facility in those hours. But
Okay. Yeah, and I would concur with all of that. And I think the 24-hour question really comes down to, are you in a 24, quote unquote, 24-hour neighborhood, right? In other words, is there a demand for that? Another asterisk I would put on that relates to laundromat insurance, property and liability insurance, which can be difficult to attain. And we have our own insurance program for that purpose. But you can imagine insurance for 24-hour locations is also a challenge, both from a cost perspective, but also in terms of availability. So I would just add that as part of your homework, folks. Okay. All right. Laundromat valuation. We need 3 hours to cover this topic, but we're going to do it in 3 minutes. I'm going to give you just the top lines and then just knowing that there's lots of other resources here. And I know this is one of the key questions that a lot of you have. But I will start with valuations of any business. There's some art and there's some science. And with laundromats, maybe a little bit more art than science than maybe some other businesses. But simply put, laundromats are typically valued on a multiple of the annual net income. And just to keep it simple, top line revenue less the operating expenses gives you a net income, and then taking an annualized multiple on that. Now, this is where I hesitate, but I'm going to share it. Most stores historically sell somewhere between 3 and 5 times that annual net. Now, is that what they're worth? Maybe, but that's what most sell for. And so there's plenty of stores that are only worth 1 or 2, and there's plenty of stores, especially these days, that might be selling for 6 or 7 based on the market. But historically, it's that 3 to 5 times net. And as I say, those valuations are trending higher in today's environment, and that is somewhat cyclical, but it's a hot time right now. But more important for this conversation, I would argue, is what are the fundamentals? What drives this value? And I think that helps you understand a lot of these opportunities, particularly if you're combing these listings for existing stores for sale, because quite often they miss on one of these factors. So let me just start with these factors. Net income. Now, yes, it's a net with a multiplier, but it's safe to say that higher volume stores that by definition would have a higher net do tend to also demand higher multiples because people are looking for bigger stores, higher volume stores. And so that's just something that just to be prepared for. You just by definition, a store that's 5 or 6 or 7,000 square foot is going to ask a higher multiple than a store that's 1,000 or 2,000 feet. Far more important, and Neal talked about one of these items, so I'll start there, which is the age and condition of the equipment. Um, the uh, the equipment, the need to recapitalize a store or re-equip a store is a major consideration. And your offer, I think, ought to be informed by where is that store when it comes to equipment. Is it 5-year-old equipment or 25-year-old equipment? Is it 10-year-old equipment or 20-year-old equipment? Because as Neal pointed out, one of the common mistakes, most common mistakes I see is paying list price or asking price for a laundromat under the promise that the equipment is perfectly good. And then you find yourself up to your elbows in out of order machines 3 months later, and then you've got to turn around and re-equip the place, which may be a cost that double or even triple what you paid for the business. So that is a trap where you really want to understand where you are with the equipment on the front end and just understand that um, you know, you have to understand what the total investment will look like, not just the asking price, but what may be there in terms of realistic replacement cost. So the best way to attack that, I think, is to arm yourself with the facts. If you're looking at a location, have somebody go in there and a qualified equipment distributor and tell you what would it cost to replace this equipment in today's market. And I don't care if the equipment's 4 years old, 7 years old, but especially if it's 10, 15, 20 years old, really understand what that equipment replacement cost is and understand that a store with old equipment is not going to command, from an educated buyer's perspective, not going to demand that higher range of multiples. And the other thing that you could argue is more important is the age and condition of the lease. So put simply, you can't pick up and move a laundromat. At least that's for that's for the real experts that really know what they're doing. But even they won't typically try to do this. So imagine you've got a cash flow of this business that's protected by a lease for a finite period of time, and when the lease is up, you're out of business. And so to tie these things together, the newer the equipment and the longer the lease, the higher the multiple. The older the equipment, the shorter the lease, the lower the multiple. And that's maybe sounds like an oversimplification, but that really does cover most of the territory. And so um, a lot of the problems that I see our members get into really relate to that second one on the lease. Because if you look at listings in a lot of markets, you see a lot of old equipment and short leases, and that's why the store is for sale. And so you need to be able to navigate that. Either don't buy it at the very low end of the valuation so you can rectify those situations or have contingencies, right? Where you can say, well, I'll make this offer contingent on the ability to extend the lease so that you have adequate time remaining. So, but if I want you to remember one thing from this, the older the equipment, the shorter the lease remaining, the less the store is worth. The longer the lease, the newer the equipment, the more the store is worth.
So Brian, let me just jump in for a
Please.
second. Um, when I look at this equation, and you're absolutely right in what you say, Brian, to me, let's just assume you're going to pay a 5 times multiple
Okay.
on earnings, okay? In a reasonable business transaction, you should be looking at return on investment. How
Right.
am I going to get this back? Okay. If you're going to pay a 5x to buy it, you need to have more than 5 years on the lease to get your money back. Okay. And if you want a 100% return on investment, you need 10 years on your lease. Okay. So that's kind of a simple way to look
Sure.
at it. The other
Hmm.
thing is, if you want a return on investment, you pay 5x and you've got 10 years on your lease, you could say to yourself, okay, I'm going to make my money back times two. That's great. Oh, but wait a minute. I have to spend $1 million redoing the store. Oops, my return on investment is gone. So
Right.
all of those things have to be put in for it to make sense.
Yeah, no, well stated and well emphasized. It just is really that's the crux of this whole business. And I know a lot of you are looking at existing stores, so I just want to make sure that you're equipped with this as you go in looking eyes wide open. And then beyond that, due diligence can be challenging to buy any business, but certainly a small cash business can bring other challenges. Many of you express frustrations. Well, I asked about this store. They don't have any records. They don't have any books. Well, so how are you going to overcome that? Are you going to just believe them on the face of it? Are you going to look at it more from this kind of an asset sale lens? Are you going to use some of the techniques that we can share with you about sort of forensically reconstructing income based on utility consumption and some other alternative methods? We can help you with all that. But I just want you to understand that it can be challenging. Don't be surprised if it's challenging when you get into the due diligence phase of this. And what else did I have here? Oh, yes. And so again, these stores don't exist in a vacuum. Neal's got 25 stores in the mile or mile and a half nearby. So again, you want to look at the value, but you have to understand what else is going on competitively in the marketplace. All right, I'm going to talk about financing because it's another common question, and then I'm going to get caught up. I know Jonathan's got another question on deck, Bob, and a few others, and we've got another 25 minutes or so to go, so we'll knock out some more questions. So financing. Um, this is really important. And again, each of you comes from a different fiscal background and have access to different ways of getting capital into the mix here. So I'm just going to talk about what's most common in my having done this for 30 plus years. Particularly if people have an existing business or are otherwise strong, they may already have a conventional bank that they have a relationship with and can go there to fund the business. And certainly SBA can offer a number of additional options. Now, the challenge there, especially if you're a first timer, is to find a bank locally that has an SBA sort of appetite and that has somebody on board, typically on their team. I call it like an SBA Sherpa, someone who can kind of guide you through that process, who's been down that road. And as a general statement, I'll say that the SBA likes the laundromat business. They've had good experience with it. They're warm to it. But again, the devil's in the details in terms of having a partner that is going to work with you to seek that SBA guaranteed loan. By far, the most of these projects have something to do with what I'll call captive lenders, industry-specific lenders, people that are in business to finance laundromat projects. Now, why does this exist? Well, because the kind of the conventional lending world, isn't always very warm to small business, or you could argue in our case, kind of a micro business, a mom and pop business. They certainly don't have a lot of experience with the laundromat industry. And frankly, most of you come to this not having previous business experience or at least small business ownership, and certainly haven't owned a laundromat before. And so a lot of these institutions, all right, show me your 2 years experience. Show me your 3 years experience. Well, we don't have that, right? And so in part, that kind of created this kind of intra-industry ecosystem of creating the lending capability most often through the equipment manufacturers themselves, right? So most of the equipment manufacturers have a facility for financing that relates to their particular equipment to help facilitate that. And that's based on their knowledge of the business, obviously their desire to sell some equipment, but also the fact that they can view this equipment as a considerable part of the collateral picture, right? You go to a conventional bank, and I've had these conversations. If something goes wrong and it doesn't pan out, what are they going to do with a bunch of older used laundry equipment? Nothing. They've called me like, how do I get rid of this? How do I get pennies on the dollar and try to get something back on this? Whereas a captive lender in the laundromat business, they're a sales organization, right? So they'd rather not your loan go bad, but if the worst thing happened, they have ways to remarket that equipment, and they may even put themselves in a position where they can get into that location and bring another customer into that location. So those captive lenders, you can get a list of those on our website, laundryassociation.org, and that directory that I mentioned earlier. Andrew can put it in the chat again for you, but there are a lot of those resources. Now, especially in today's social media environment, you see a ton of conversation about seller financing, seller financing, seller financing. While it's not a myth, it is pretty rare in my experience. You don't see a lot of buyers that are willing to carry paper on that sale and to be the bank. When I do see that, it's a handful of situations where there's some other distressful element. They don't have records. You can't get it. You can't get a loan. They can't get a loan because there's no paper trail. There's no records. Those are the situations that I see seller financing as opposed to people are looking to, kind of make a tax advantaged move to offer you the financing. So you can look for it, you can explore it, but manage your expectations. I don't see a lot of transactions that follow that path these days unless there's some kind of big problem. And again, most of our first timers, it's some combination of things, right? They've got obviously their savings, maybe they have a business partner, they get an SBA loan, they get an equipment loan. So it may be some combination of these things to be able to cobble together the initial financial package, especially when you get started. So again, everyone's going to get a copy of this presentation, but I just want to lay out some of those options for you there so you understand that. Okay. I'm going to skip through a couple of these things that you can see later. The buyer build, I can't remember whose question that was. It may have been Bob, but this is just a restatement of some of the things we talked about, the advantages of buying versus the advantages of building, the drawbacks. But essentially, when you're buying a place, the advantage primarily is that it's at a lower price point and it's an existing business. There's an existing cash flow. It's a proven location. When it comes to buying or building out something new, you've got that advantage of new. People are attracted to a new place, bright, shiny, the latest technology. It's your baby, it's your thing. But the flip side of that is that it's a larger investment and it's a yet to be proven location. So I'll let you suss through this chart. I won't read it back to you, but those are kind of the basics on buy versus build. And if we haven't hammered it enough, I just always like to add one more slide on leases because it is just absolutely mission critical. And in addition to the things we talked about earlier, make sure that not only using an attorney when you're being assigned or transferred a lease in the course of a purchase, or if you're doing a new project, if it's a new lease, make sure someone looks at it and make sure that someone who knows the laundromat business also takes a look at it for you, because it is absolutely critical that you get this part of it right. And people always ask, well, what's the right amount of time on a lease? Neal gave that example earlier on the return on investment. I'd like to see a 10-year minimum remaining. Some can make an argument to go down as low as 8. Anything less than that, I think, is really difficult to have the numbers work for you. You could always be looking for an opportunity to extend and add options on a new lease. I think most of our members ask for 10 years plus 2 or 3 5-year options that would total 20 to 25 years. That sounds crazy. That doesn't mean you need to run it for 25 years, but you need to have the ability to secure the laundromat's ability to do business there over that period of time for all the reasons that we've covered to this point. Neal, I'll ask you, if you were trying to initiate a lease tomorrow, what would be your ask when it comes to term?
Well, if I was going in day one on an existing store, uh, I mean, I would ask for a 10-year lease with 2 5s on the back end. I certainly would not want to make a big investment going forward without at least another 10 years on the lease. When we retooled well, we've been in our store 11 years.
Okay.
I have 4 years remaining on my original lease. And when we retooled, I put 2 more 5s on the back end of our lease. So right now, I've got 14 years remaining after being in the store 11 years. So,
Outstanding. Yeah. And what we talk about a lot with our members is, our existing members is, sometimes the one thing you can do to make your store more valuable is to negotiate another 5 years on the back end, another option, so you're at 14, can you get to 19? Can you get to 24 by adding additional options, down the road? So do your homework on the leases, and we're here to help you. I help our members, with some of those questions on a regular basis. So I'm going to put this screen up with some of the additional resources, and I got a few other things to share, but I'm going to try to do a little catch up lightning round on the questions. Um, Neal, I'll throw this one to you from Joe in the chat. Um, how often do the best performing laundromats get cleaned? Daily, twice daily, more often? It seems to me if you're attended, you're kind of cleaning all day, every day, right?
there's no question about that. In fact, I often joke that if our store was unattended, my customers would drown in dryer sheets after the first day.
Right, it'd be up to their neck, right? Dryer sheets on the floor.
Unbelievable. We clean our store every day. I mean, our attendants are constantly cleaning the tops of the washers, the soap dishes, the powder detergent that's spilled all over the floor, the Coca-Cola that's spilled in the playroom, the dryer sheets. Our attendants on the third shift vacuum the lint screens of all of the dryers every single night. This is critical. I'm not talking about the customer experience. I'm talking about your store burning down.
Right, right, right.
This is critical. So we are just constantly working on cleaning. That beautiful parking lot we have for 50 cars is also a trash dump. I cannot tell you how many people open the door of their car, sweep out everything in it, and leave it in the parking lot. Our people clean the parking lot every single shift, 3 times a day. So you're cleaning all the time. That's the customer experience.
Yeah, I think that's well stated. And Joe, I do see if it's an unattended store, in a smaller, suburban or rural setting, they typically would have, somebody come in the morning to clean and someone coming in the evening or even midday to come clean at some point during that period, because it does have a way of getting very dirty very fast. And so that's why so many of these are fully attended for all the reasons that Neal just pointed out. Let me try to scope through some of these questions, some things we haven't touched on yet. Neal, do you mind just talking a minute, a little bit more about the delivery business, and just kind of what are some of those basics related to that? I see a number of questions in here that relate to offering laundry delivery.
Okay, happy to do that. But let me touch on something else first. I had
Okay.
mentioned earlier the 3 segments of the business. There's the walk-in self-service, right? People do their own laundry. There's the drop-off where our attendants do the laundry, and then there's the pickup and delivery. I won't go into the numbers, but I will say that of those 3 segments, the drop-off service where the customer brings their laundry and we do the laundry and return it to them. The drop-off business has the highest profit margin
Yeah.
of the 3 segments. So
Okay.
that's just point of reference. As
Hmm.
far as the pickup and delivery, first of all, I would suggest that if you're going to go in it, understand it's an entirely different business than a self-service laundromat. There's a ton of logistics. There's an entirely different marketing and advertising and customer acquisition scenario. The processing of the laundry is critical. Our goal is when we process laundry for that pickup and delivery customer, we fold it, we package it in such a way that when they open that bundle in their house, they feel like they're getting new clothes. And you need to do that because the pickup and delivery is not only discretionary spending, it's a concierge service at
Right.
a way higher price point than either of the other two. So there's a lot of logistics involved. We've got 3 trucks on the road. We've got 6 different routes. We're out there 5 days a week. You've got to have a customer facing application. We have both a website and an app on the phone so that the customer can schedule the pickups and the deliveries. We have to be able to route the drivers efficiently. That's all computerized. We have to be able to do all the weighing and the invoicing and the credit card processing. Again, it's all computer software that you're not going to build yourself unless you're a genius way beyond me. You're going to go out and you're going to couple up with some service that's going to, some company that's going to provide all of those things to you. Packaging is a big deal. Uh, uh, oh, the marketing, it's all digital marketing. It's not magazine advertisements. It's not radio or television. Although I have heard some pickup and
Mhm.
delivery services on the
Sure.
radio, but it's really a digital advertising um, endeavor. And it's primarily Google Ads with landing pages on your website. You have to be very specific about what areas you want to go to, and then you want to advertise efficiently in those areas. So it's a very specialized business and it's very different than a laundromat. In fact, we tell people that the pickup and delivery business is 1/3 of our sales and 3/4 of our effort.
Okay.
It takes a lot more work than a self-service laundromat.
Thank you. Super helpful overview, and it touches on a number of these questions that we've seen here, and that does get us caught up. Um, Let me look for a couple more here. Julie's just asking about the recording. Yes, we'll send you an email within the next 24 hours that we can initiate sharing the recording. A lot of buy versus build questions. I think we've covered those pretty well. Let's see what else here. Okay, well, I'll continue to scan through these, but on screen, I've got a few other resources I want to share with you. One is our Super Bowl, our World Series, our World Cup rolled into one for this industry is called the Clean Show. And lucky for all of you at this stage, it's coming up in a couple months. End of August, as a matter of fact, August 23rd to 26th in Orlando. This is the Super Bowl. This is the big deal for the industry, education, equipment, networking. I would be very confident in saying that these 4 days could take 4 years off your learning curve. It is a impactful opportunity. And this is kind of where I say spend a few $100s or a few $1,000s before you spend a few 100,000. This would definitely apply to the Clean Show. We're fortunate to be a longtime sponsor of the show, and so we'll be doing lots of activities in terms of education, networking, and connecting our members. So highly, highly recommend the Clean Show. And the next one is not until the summer of 2027. So hit it now, or you got 2 years to wait until the next show. Another thing to put on your calendar, we've had a ton of questions on wash, dry, fold, and delivery. We actually have our own conference dedicated to just that. So coming up in Nashville at the end of October will be our wash, dry, fold workshop. This will be a ton of education, networking, exhibits from our vendor members that specialize in the wash, dry, fold space. Highly recommended, great ways to reinforce your knowledge. And that's really one of the main takeaways I like to leave you with is there are a ton of resources available to you. So it's a matter of taking advantage of them. Another thing that I'll just put a bug in your ear is that once you do make a purchase or you build out your store, we have a number of business solutions starting with insurance, marketing, utility buying. We even have a sort of a company credit card for our members. So just know that as you get into the business, we've built out a lot of resources to help support you along the way. I also want to point out, I mentioned a video with Neal and his crew yesterday. If you go to the CLA Spotlight, you'll see a number of these videos where we take a deep dive with our members. So please use that as a resource. And join, right? Please join, become a member. I know I've got a call this afternoon with one of you. I know Jonathan, we've got a call with you coming up. So please take advantage of the opportunity. The rate for the first year membership is $599. So we're not talking about a giant investment. And again, it comes with all the resources that we've touched on, including a one-on-one with me. And here's your promo. So we'll make that $499 if you're able to join today. But again, this is a great business. There's a lot of resources available. The best way for you to take advantage of that is to get involved, come to these events, join as a member, really invest in your future success in the business. And we feel very confident that we're going to be able to help you with that. So take advantage of that. And we've got just an amazing group of members all around the country, like Neal, who are very generous with their time and with their expertise. So don't hesitate to reach out to us and we can get you connected in any way possible. And so
Let
with
me,
that,
uh, let,
go ahead, Neal.
let me just jump in and say that I will be at the Clean Show for its entirety. Would welcome the opportunity to meet with anyone, talk about laundromats. I love to do it. And I will say that Brian Wallace has all of my contact information. If you'd like to talk with me, email, phone, want to come by my store, more than happy to talk to anybody. So please feel free to contact me.
Awesome. Well, Neal, you're the best, and there's a good opportunity to thank you again for giving us 90 minutes of your time and expertise and willingness to share. And I can't thank our attendees enough. You guys have been terrific with your questions. And I know even in 90 minutes, we can't get to them all, but I think we covered a lot of ground. And hopefully this whets your appetite for diving in further. We're here to help you, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again, Neal.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.